Hello, beautiful dragons. I am your host, Heather, and welcome to our book club, our first book club. This is Tea Dragons Book Club. I have a special guest with me today, Katie, who has a blog. She has a blog, Katie Lou. Does life. That's what it was. I was going to say does stuff. I was going to say does stuff, and I'm like, that's not correct. Does stuff.
She does a few bits and bobs, around the house, in the garden, standard stuff.
But yes, she has a blog. We're friends, in case you didn't know.
Been friends for a long time now.
We have, indeed.
How long has it been, at least? Is it over 7 years?
It's over 7 years, I believe.
We've made it, mate.
We have.
Forever going to be friends now.
We have made it.
We've made it, everybody.
There is supposed to be a third member to our little book club, but she didn't read the book in time.
Yeah, we had some issues. Well, me and you didn't.
We didn't.
Our third member had some issues.
We stormed through it. Our third member had some issues. And then is slow at reading.
So hopefully she'll be joining us next month.
Hopefully she'll join us next month, but...
Well, actually, I say next month. At the end of this month.
At the end of this month.
She'll be joining us.
Oh, okay.
God.
So, because no one knows what we were doing for the book club this month, because I made no announcements or anything, we read The Magpie Society by Zoe Sugg and Amy McCulloch? McCulloch?
I think so.
McCulloch.
McCulloch? I don't know.
I don't know.
We've butchered it. Let's be honest, we've butchered it.
Let's be honest, we have butchered it. And do you know what? On my screen, this is going to be backwards. So good luck reading this, everyone. Have fun reading the title and the author.
This technical club, like, honestly. Like,
it's just the way it works, because the secret's out. I'm screen recording it, so...
True.
So yeah, we're going to...
Also, just in case anybody's wondering, I'm eating a roast dinner.
She's also
just
reading
in case anybody wanted to know. If you're wondering, what's Katie eating? Like...
Well, I suppose we should get into the discussion. I don't know what I did, but for some reason my book is like fraying there. I don't know why.
Yeah, mine's a bit like that. I'd get it out for you all, but it's down on the shelf. It's just a bit of a faff.
That's all right. I'm just, I've got it. It's all backwards, but it's okay. It's all good.
Yeah. That's the only reason I don't really like hardback books. Sorry to anybody that loves hardback books.
How dare you?
Like, I prefer the paper ones, if I'm being honest. I find them easy to hold, easy to read. Obviously, that doesn't mean I'd never read a hardback. But because of the, film sleeve, it all just gets messy, doesn't it?
Yeah, but you've got the film sleeve, and then you get what's underneath the film sleeve.
Well, true.
Like, nothing's making you keep the sleeve on.
I know, I just feel weird if I take it off. That's the thing. Like, even when I'm reading it, I feel odd if I take it off. I don't know if it's because, obviously, the image on the front, that's what you picture it to look like, don't you? Because that's the first thing you see from the book, isn't it? The image, so... I don't know, but yeah. Let us know in the comments. Are you hardback books or paper books? Let us know.
Hardback or paperback? That's a huge debate you don't want to
start. Let us know. Book fans.
Right, we should probably talk about the book. I mean, you're the one that really, really wanted to read this book.
Yeah, to be fair, guys, I really wanted to read it. So it came out last Halloween, didn't it? Last year, Halloween. I think
roundabout. It was definitely between October and December.
Yeah, it came out, I think, roughly near the end of October, I think. And so when we when Heather decided she wanted to do a book club.
Oh wait, hang on. I have to say there are probably spoilers. I have to put the warning in. There are probably spoilers. But continue.
If you're reading it or want to read it, I'd say probably don't watch this video. Well, read it. Come back and then watch the video. But anyway, so when we were deciding, because obviously we were like, well, how are we going to pick what book we're going to read? But because it was something we both did want to read, we were like, oh, should we just do that? And then obviously for our third member, we were like, oh, are you all right with reading this? Even though she hasn't even read it all yet, but we're like, "Oh, you all right reading this?" And she was like, "Yeah, great." So that's kind of how we picked for the first book, wasn't it? Like, it wasn't really.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Like, for the others, we're going to do something more random, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. It was just choosing a starting point. So, yeah, I didn't really know. I mean, I only knew what you told me about it, and I didn't really go in expecting much. I just thought that there'd be, you know, like a murder mystery, but like at a high school. Well, not a high school. It's a boarding school, which is set in the UK, which is nice. You don't. I mean, I haven't read many books so far like that, and I had like high hopes. I did.
I think everybody did, you know.
And they were crushed dramatically. My hopes for this book were like choke slammed into off a cliff, which makes sense if you read the book.
Well, I mean, it relates to the story. Sorry, spoilers, but
What do you mean, sorry, spoilers? I did the spoiler warning. We can say what we want.
True. I mean, I feel like the structure at the beginning. If any of you have ever watched Wild Child, God, what a movie! If any of you are old enough here that have watched Wild Child, the first start of the book does feel a lot like that. Because I read another book last year called Dead Popular. I genuinely can't remember who it's by, but it's by the person who also wrote, I think it's We Were Liars. I think she's also written that one. I can't remember who it's by. Somebody will know. And it kind of gives the same vibe to that one, because again, like, that one's about like a high school, and I think it's also a boarding school maybe, and, you know, somebody dies, and then, like, you know, or something like that, you know, or somebody like dies wanting to be popular or something. Again, another spoiler, sorry. But yeah, kind of like along similar lines. So it kind of reminded me of like those kind of stories for, like, you know, the very start. Like, and then it just gets a bit we'll say interesting.
It gets
like
interesting.
But interesting not in like a like kind of like, oh, like, what's happening? Kind of more like, oh, why? Why?
Well, see, I like the book. I do. But it's not a masterpiece. There are many things that aren't there that don't need to be there. There's a lot of ways that it could have been improved. There is a lot to say about the book. But I think the most disappointing thing for me is I came into this expecting a murder mystery. It being about Lola and finding out the actual circumstances around her death and if she was actually killed by somebody else.
Because I still feel like we don't actually know a lot about Lola's life, even from the first book. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, I know they say, like, oh, you know, well, everybody was friends with her, but nobody fully really knew her. It's a shame how, like, just with that, they couldn't have dug deeper into that as well.
As the book went on, it became, I don't know if it became apparent to you, but it became apparent to me that this book isn't really a murder mystery at all. The authors wanted to focus on the namesake of the book, the Magpie Society that they'd created. Because, I mean, it's portrayed as like, oh, if we figure out the Magpie Society, we'll figure out what happened to Lola. But that doesn't really... The two don't kind of meld together at all.
Not in the first book, no.
They're like two separate things.
Yeah.
And
it's like, and then, like what I wrote on my Goodreads review. If any of you have got Goodreads, hit us up on Goodreads. Love Goodreads. Obviously, you can write your own reviews and stuff on there. And a lot of people have written reviews on there for this book in particular. Like, there's so many split ones. It's crazy how different they all are. But, like, one thing that I wrote in my review is, like, I feel like there's 3 mini stories happening in one story, and they all do connect, but you don't really know why. Like, and it kind of feels like, you know, when you watch a Netflix show and, like, you witness events that are happening, but you don't really get what's going on, like, sort of thing. Like, you know, you don't know why they link, but they're kind of just there. Like, kind of like that.
What I was saying was, that wasn't just what disappointed me. When you get to the end, they finally read this letter that Audrey conveniently forgets about for like a good quarter of the book, after she's like, oh, I'm actually going to read it, and then forgets about it. That made it clear that at least the author wants the reader to think that it was actually suicide. Because there's just the clear... I don't think I wrote down the piece of dialogue.
You know,
but
in a way.
It's like she's basically... Lola was in love with the teacher, which is very inappropriate anyway. And she wrote him letters, and in this letter that she didn't send to him for some reason... Why she hid it in a cubbyhole, we don't know. But in the letter she wrote, if we can't be with each other in this life, then I'll wait for you in the next life. And that's pretty clear cut of suicide. But then there's also other questions, like there's this mysterious eyewitness that saw two people on the cliff that doesn't get mentioned again after the podcast gets shut down.
Yeah.
It's just...
You know, it almost feels like we started out knowing that there was a murder. Okay, it's Lola's died. Or, you know, maybe it wasn't a murder, maybe it was suicide. We still don't really know. But, like, it almost feels like through the book, rather than wanting justice for Lola, they kind of forget Lola even died. So it almost makes me think, you know, like how they said Lola was like a really important part of the school and everybody knew her and loads of people were like involved with her and stuff. Like it kind of counteracts that, because like through the whole story you don't even hear her mentioned that much. The only thing that keeps her alive for a while is the podcast, and then when that's shut down, it's almost like, you know, like, oh, she died, never mind. Like, they don't seem to go back to that. Like, even at the end, they don't seem to link it back to her. It's almost like she was just like, they were kind of like, well, it almost feels a bit like the authors were like, right, how can we start this mysterious story? Oh, we'll kill somebody at the beginning and then in we go.
Yeah.
Like, there's no link to her after that.
I mean, going like off from that, one of the first things that happens is on the link with the podcast is the threat of someone's next, like someone else is going to die, and at no point does anybody else die.
No. The only thing we get at the end is we discover that Clover, another character who was running the podcast, was actually, well, we assume invited into the Magpie Society because there's a letter in her room on the night of this party that Ivy and Audrey discover. But by then it's too late. Like, they get to her room, she's gone. No idea where she is. She's disappeared, she's gone. And there's like a mysterious recording of somebody coming in her room, because it's still recording when they go and see that she's not in her room.
Yeah,
like, and somebody's taken her, and we have no idea who that person is. Was it the Magpie Society? Was it somebody else? Who knows? We don't know.
And then there was also some blood, which just leaves you to speculate of, because everyone's trying to make out that the Magpie Society aren't bad, they're good, but then you've got this contradicting actions of what's going on, and there isn't an antagonist or an enemy force up against the Magpie Society that could be doing this, that wants people to know about the society or wants to bring the society down, if it does still exist.
Because of course, as well, for so long they have a tradition in the school where when they come to the school they offer something to the magpies around this fountain, a bit like, you know, when you flip a coin into a fountain to make a wish. But nobody's really like ever said until this incident when, you know, like after when Lola died and stuff, nobody ever really said like, oh, well, the reason we do this is because this happened once. Nobody knows why they do it. They just do it. Like, and I suppose it's kind of like a thing, you know, I get we all have our little things that sometimes you do and you don't really know why, but you feel weird when you don't do them. But, you know what I mean? Even that's not explored in the first story. Like, you have no idea why they do certain things they do.
The thing is, you can't just keep putting it on that this is a first story in a series, which was always intended to be a series, because what they've done is they've left out a lot of things. It feels like they're setting up things, and I've read setup books. I've read setup books that are like preparing you for what's going to come, but they're still a self-contained story. You know, there's still a self-contained story, and it was still entertaining, and it still made sense, and it felt like you weren't completely wasting your time. Whereas there is times with this where it felt like, why am I reading about this? Like, why is this scene in here? Like, I don't know why the setup of the book was so long. It's basically half of the book, the first half of the book is kind of set up, establishing the school or establishing the rules or establishing the characters, when a lot more could have happened if right off the bat they had the two main characters be friends. And sure, I get it, you want to do like an enemies to friends sort of story, but you didn't give them a sufficient reason of why they would be enemies. The only reason was that this one girl was going to get this dorm all to herself, and now she's upset that she can't have a room to herself. That's not a strong argument for you to be horrible to somebody. You know?
Because, you know, like when the story first started, when, like, in the prologue, when they say, like, oh, Lola's died, or, you know, a student's body's washed up on the beach or whatever. Like, from when it started, I thought it was going to be a story, like, so you start with the main thing that's happened, and then, like, not almost like you go back, but I thought there was going to be a point in the story when we went back to that night, because occasionally characters do mention subtle things that make me question them. There's quite a few characters that say odd things, or like there's a lot of the time, like there's like questions like, oh, well, where were you at the start of the party? And they never answer it.
Oh yeah, that's
they
so
don't give you a direct answer, but at the same time we never get to go back to that night. You never know what happened that night. All you know is that there was this party, apparently nobody had their phones, and then like Lola's body is washed up on the beach somehow. That's all you know.
That is so true that they don't go back to the night, because like you have the whole thing with Teddy. Teddy wasn't there, he didn't show up, and then you have Araminta, that's her name, showed up late, and no one questions this. There's no answers as to why or where they are. Like, there's so much, they add in so much mystery that then doesn't really have a payoff.
Because you don't learn anything from those mysteries.
It still felt to me that the order of priorities when writing the story was Magpie Society, murder case, or Magpie Society, Lola's death. That's the hierarchy of the order, it felt like. Because they go on like this whole mystery hunt.
Especially because as well, like, obviously I know we're not following the point of view of Lola's friends, and obviously they're grieving for their friend who's just died. But it's interesting how, like, there's not more justice for Lola. Like, the only bit of justice you see is when her brother Patrick gets involved with Clover to, like, bring this podcast about to keep her name about, but it turns out he's paying her for it, and it's, you know, all this big drama that goes on in the middle of the story. But, like, even that, like, not much comes from that either. So it kind of just feels like Lola's death is kind of slotted in. It's not really a follow through of the whole story.
Yeah. Can I help you?
Cat drama,
Kit
everybody.
Kat wants to get involved.
He wants to say his point.
I got more to say. Next thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about the characters. Like, not specifically the main characters, but the number of characters that are introduced that then doesn't lead anywhere. Like, one thing I said, one thing that I put in my notes towards the beginning is whenever a new character is mentioned, there's like this little bit of exposition about the character that you don't need. Don't tell me about them. Show them to me. You know, that's the whole, well, not the whole rule of reading, but one of the things that the advice they give is show, not tell. Even if it is, no matter what writing medium it is for some reason, whether it's scripts, whether it's a play, whether it's a book, it's show, not tell. So there's like this whole, Clover isn't even in the scene. She's just mentioned, and there's this entire paragraph and a half about who she is as a character. And then other characters are introduced, like Ivy's whole friend group is introduced, and I don't even remember half of their names because it's not important. They're just there. And then for some random reason, they come back later in the story just to kind of be there. Even Ivy's best friend, who they have to mention is a lesbian for some reason, even though she takes no part. She doesn't really have a part in the story. She's just there occasionally. You know what I mean? And then they make a whole big deal about the scene when they go to the gardener's cottage, and then his son shows up, and Ivy's all weird about it.
That's one thing that I want to know more about in the second book. Like, what's going on with that? Because that seems so odd that she was so like, oh.
It's just so
like for
weird.
a while that made me think, because for a long time, like, the only thing I will praise for the book, well, not the only thing, but one of the things that the book does well, you virtually question every single character mentioned at some point of doing something dodgy, whether that was Lola's death or not. Like, all the main ones that keep coming back, like Araminta and Teddy, and then that weird gardener guy, and like a lot of people that have like weird moments. Because there was a point in the story where I was like, well, what if it was Ivy? Like, what if she did something to Lola and we don't know? Like, it kind of really messes with your head, like, and I think because there's so much kind of going on, you can't, that like you even can't make sense of, because you don't know why it's relevant at the time you're reading it. Say I'm reading something in chapter 10, and at the time it doesn't feel relevant, but maybe it might come back in chapter 29, for example. Like some stories do that, they link it back through, but like, like there was loads of points where I kept thinking, is Ivy like done something? Is she the dodgy one? But then there'd be other things where I'm like, oh no, it can't be her. And then I'd be like, oh, but maybe it could be. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's no point person through the story. You can be like, yeah, it's you. There's no point where honestly, I have no idea who on earth killed Lola. If anybody has any ideas, let us know in the comments.
Well, I mean, I at the moment, based on the evidence, think it's suicide. But given that, I mean, if she'd given him loads of letters before, why did Lola leave that in the cubby hole? Unless it's just for plot convenience.
Maybe.
I mean, I didn't really feel the same as you. There was a point when I was like dead set on like Araminta has done something.
Oh yeah.
Because the way she's acting, the position that she now has because Lola's gone, and things like that. But then they read the letter, and I was like, oh, so this wasn't even murder anyway. You know? It just, it made me disappointed. And
like, there's just a lot of confusing moments, isn't there?
You don't really
know.
Because, like, there's still no answer as to who on earth drew the magpie on her back. There's just so many questions that weren't answered in the book, and you can't just chalk that up to, oh, it's the first one in the series, they'll get answered in the next one. That's not good storytelling. It's just not.
Because, like, don't get me wrong, obviously, you know, it has mystery, and like what I said in my Goodreads review, I think there is potential there to give it more. You know, like, I still want to know who the Magpie Society are, like, you know, what they do, you know, why they're a known thing. And, you know, I think there are still ways to delve deeper, but I feel like in book one, they didn't give us enough to, like, formulate it all as one thing. Like,
I mean, and I just thought I was talking earlier about how, you know, characters are introduced and then not brought up until later. An example of that is just Teddy as well.
Oh, yeah.
Teddy is in there at the beginning, and they set up this whole thing of he wasn't there that night, and he's not telling Ivy where he was. Then he disappears, and then he comes back later as a mechanism to get Ivy and Audrey to be friends. That's it, because he's texting them both at the same time. Even though I don't understand why it was such a huge deal, because his text didn't really seem that bad.
Yeah.
And also, he'd only done it. It was done it that one day. That one day he was messaging them both. How does that then constitute to his two-timing, you know?
But surely it would only be such a big problem if, say, him and Ivy were actually dating.
Yeah.
Because obviously, from what you learn of Teddy in the beginning, that's what he wants. But for some reason, Ivy doesn't really want that. So obviously, you get why he goes away a little bit, because Ivy wants to keep her distance. That's what she says to the reader. I want to keep my distance from Teddy. But, well, she claims it's to focus on school. But I think there would have been a more interesting thing of if it was... I mean, it still could be. We don't know, because Teddy is still a bit of a mysterious character with not being there at the party and other stuff going on. But, like, I think it would have been a more interesting thing is if, like, say, Ivy suspected him of doing something, which is why she wanted to keep her distance rather than just be like, oh, I want to focus on school. Because, you know, like, when you set something up to be a mystery and a murder, fair enough, I get it set in a school. But I'll be honest, I'm not really bothered that much about what they're always doing in the school. Like,
No.
I don't, like...
No. I mean, to still go on about Teddy after that whole incident, he then disappears again until Ivy needs him. You know? And, yeah. I mean, another thing is, one of the mysteries that you think would go all the way through is who's running the podcast.
It's kind of a shame that they
answered.
didn't use that as the main thing for book one, because I think it would have worked a lot better.
It really would have. They took that mystery away halfway through. It was gone. And even then, they weren't really, you know, there wasn't much mystery. I figured out who it was based on one thing one character said, and that's because...
What was the thing again?
Oh, Ivy told
the...
basically all of her friends that she'd been tasked by the principal, which, by the way, we don't get told whether she still gets to have that dinner with the person from Oxford after she, you know, reveals who it is. But
oh yeah, I forgot about that.
We don't know that. That bargain's never mentioned again. She tells all her friends that she's on the hunt for who's doing the podcast so that she can get basically ahead in her career where she wants to go. And she's talking to Clover, and Clover points her in the direction of Audrey, which, by the way, wouldn't make sense at all, especially with the way that the podcaster talks, as to why Ivy would be doing it. Not Ivy, Audrey would be doing it. But she basically pointed in the direction, and I was like, well, it's Clover then. She's the only one of the characters that put forward a name or put forward a hint of who could possibly be doing the podcast. And that just makes it look like her. if you had other characters maybe doing that, or if she had said nothing, then it wouldn't have been so obvious. But it was.
True. Because to be fair, I didn't pick up on it at the time. I don't know why. I just didn't connect the dots. Maybe I don't know. I don't have a reason. But then, like, when you learn it is Clover, it makes a lot of sense, because when you go back to the beginning of the book, they have this assembly for Lola. And, like, basically, they're talking about her life and, how she was an asset to the school and stuff. And, like, Ivy mentions that Clover's doing the back bit, all the lighting and the sound and other stuff like that, and that she's like her, what do they call them? Is it fledglings? Is that what they're called? Can't remember.
Yeah, they're fledglings. So, like, she's like Ivy's apprentice.
So like the older people in the school look after somebody younger in the school, like to train them up to be as good as they are. And like there's a moment where like in the assembly all the lights go off, like all power's gone out, and then like they will, it comes back on and they've got these pieces of paper in their lap, and it does just make sense now that obviously that was Clover, because of she was doing the behind the scenes stuff. And also, I mean, when you link it to the end of the book with Clover being invited to the Magpie Society, I suppose that also links then, because obviously, well, I mean, we don't know why she did it. I mean, well, she claims it's because of wanting to keep Lola's mystery alive and keep her name alive. But I don't know, like, when we discovered about the podcast that Patrick was paying her and other stuff like that, I feel like in a way it kind of did take the authenticity away from it, like her doing the podcast, because it kind of felt like it wasn't really to do with finding out who killed Lola. It was more like a marketing scheme.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I really wish Clover was in it more. She was my favourite character.
She was a good character.
She was my favourite character, and we're not even like talking much about the main characters, and it's not that they're boring. They get like, it's a lot more interesting when they become friends, and it's very, very evident that they should have been friends in the first place, like straight away. That it, it's just why
I think it could have been interesting, like, as well, like, say if they weren't still friends, in the beginning, if they kind of took it down the route of Audrey and Ivy were doing proper separate investigations from it.
Yeah.
Like,
but they just had it as so much as Audrey was dead set against getting involved. And I just kept thinking, like, oh, this is not necessarily a hero's journey, but one of the steps in hero's journey is crossing the threshold. And I was like, oh, at some point, Audrey's going to have to cross the threshold. But she's, I
just feel like one thing I said in my review is, there's something missing for me, like, out the whole story. There's something missing, but I can't completely pinpoint what it is. Obviously it's all these little elements, but I can't completely pinpoint. Say if they did the story again, the same format, same vibe, but they, I don't know, changed a couple of things. Like, if you said to me what needs to change in that story to make that structure work, I'd be like, I don't know. Like, but to me the structure's odd, everybody. Like,
I think when you're talking about the structure, it's definitely odd because the pacing changes halfway through the book. Like, at the very beginning through, it's very slow. The pacing is so slow. And then you get to when Audrey and Ivy become friends, and the pacing just picks immediately up. It's like, it goes from nothing happening to everything happening at once.
And, sometimes that does happen in cases. You see, like, the police, for example, like, if you take it from that point of view, they might get one lead and then it leads to another and something else, and they're like, oh yeah, we're doing it, we're getting it, it's all slowly making sense. But I feel like that happened in this book, but it still didn't make any sense.
It also does feel a bit like the clues or the whatever it is to find the Magpie Society, or
they're quite
all the things they were following.
Far-fetched.
It was very easy.
They're quite far-fetched, though.
It was very easy, though. Like, if this is a secret society, they would have clues, surely, that you'd have to dwell on for like days before you even got close to coming to where their secret hideout is or to where their meeting place is. So it just seems a bit odd for them to be able to go through all of that in one day, especially since one of them is brand new to the school. I like how I know it just sounds like I'm bashing the book. I do like the book.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to, like, reread it anytime soon.
Like, one thing, hang on, let me get me Goodreads review up. Hold on. Shall I read to you what I wrote in the review?
What, all of it?
It's not, well, it's a little bit long. Not awfully long. Where is it? Here it is. Oh no, I don't want to edit the review.
Well, I'll talk about it when we talk about the end. Because we have to talk about the end. Like, really, we do.
So this is what I put in my Goodreads review, everybody. So, I gave it 3.5, but you can't actually do that on Goodreads. It only does wholes. So I had to just put it on the notes. And so this is what we wrote. I've come away from reading this with mixed feelings, if I'm honest. On paper, the plot is intriguing and dark, but in this first instalment, I didn't get that much through the story. It is very mysterious, and after reading it, I do feel like there's more to uncover, and there's a way to delve deeper into the mysterious Magpie Society. But I just feel like this first book slightly missed the mark in a couple of places for me, but I'm not 100% sure why. I almost feel the book is telling 3 mini-stories in one story. Who killed Lola, who's running the podcast, and who are the Magpie Society? Whilst those all correlate, I feel as if there wasn't enough link between the 3 in the first book to make it make sense. After reading, I actually don't know how connected I am to Ivy and Audrey. It definitely felt more like I was watching events play out rather than getting fully invested in the story, as if I'm one of the characters, because I didn't feel like that through the story. Despite the complex history of Ivy in particular, I didn't feel like it was delved into enough in the first half of the book, even though I know it's there. The whole first book feels a bit like it's all based on the events happening, even though we still didn't find out much at the end. It does have twists and turns, some seem a little bit predictable, and the structure in the story is interesting. I'm not sure if it all completely flows at every point though. But there are moments in the madness that make you question every single character. I'm still very suspicious of a handful of them, and I hope more will be revealed in the second instalment. I just feel like the authors could have given us a little bit more. I think the best way to put it is it feels more like a Netflix series playing out a set of direct events, and elements of them connect, but not all, and you don't know why. It's an easy read, and if you like mysterious stories, then you'll be intrigued by this. I'm definitely going to read the second book because I want answers to the questions I have. And I do feel there's a lot more to uncover in this world. Overall, I like the writing style. I like the image of the world in my head. I like the start of the character development. Needs a bit more. I like the idea of there being something bigger going on at the school. I like that there are questions of intrigue for the next book. I just think we could have done with a bit more to connect all the dots to get to the ending that we did. Not my favourite book I've read, but definitely not the worst either. So that's my views. That's the whole review, everybody.
That's
the whole review. Go give it a like on Goodreads.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. I like the way that the school looks.
Yeah, I do.
Like that mix of old and modern. I like the way that it looks in my head. That's one good point I have for the book. Yeah, I get what you mean by not feeling attached to the characters. I do feel like I'm just watching events play out and being told things. I think at one point I said, even though it's being told in real time, at one point I thought that maybe this is Audrey or Ivy telling somebody about events that happened.
Maybe. That could have been an interesting playoff. Maybe. That could have been.
But I don't think that's what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something else I want to say is, you know, the whole mystery with, you know, Audrey and being weird about drownings, and then there's that whole scene where she sees the sheet in the fountain and stuff. I wasn't satisfied with the payoff of her story. Not so much the story that she told, but when it was told. Because it was just her and Ivy in their room, and it was kind of like a post-credit scene or something like that, where Ivy goes, "Oh, you've never talked about why you reacted that way about the sheet in the fountain. You can do, like, I'm not going to push you to talk about it, but I will listen." And then Audrey just tells her. And I feel like maybe it would have been better to tell that story as, like, maybe a bonding experience.
Maybe.
Like, the two of them share their, you know, their history with drowning, even though it's very, you know, it's weird that it has, but the drowning victims, or Audrey's forced to share it because so many people think that she's suspicious and acting weird and has, like, guilty behaviour because of the way she's acting around everything. Like, that could have been interesting. It just felt very much like, it didn't feel natural. It didn't feel real, you know? It just felt like Ivy brought it up and Audrey felt obligated to answer.
You know, as well, like, I actually, looking back now, I didn't put this in the review, but I actually don't think I like, you know, so basically, guys, I did like their symmetry idea of how there's a party at the beginning to start the book off, and then there's a party at the end. I did kind of like that, but I feel like the party at the end of the book just, I don't know, it was just weird, like.
Oh, wait, but no, can we not talk about the ending yet? Because I want to talk about one other thing before we get to the ending. Because I think talking about the ending would be a good way to
We'll come back to that then.
So before we get to the ending, I want to talk about representation. Because in this book, it feels like they wanted to have representation. But the representation wasn't with main characters.
The only one...
Making the representation kind of null and void.
The only one that kind of got it that was... not well, I don't even think you can class Clover as a main character, because she was in the story, like, probably, I don't know, maybe 30% of the time, but you always knew of Clover. Like, I think she was the only one that was kind of more.
You've got Ivy. She's the main character. She is, I think she's UK Chinese.
I think so.
Like, that's her race. I think she talks about her grandparents being Chinese. So that's good representation. Like, she's a main character, she's of Asian descent, and I've got no problems with her, really, I suppose. I think she's good representation, although it doesn't really delve much into our culture, if that's what you're looking for in regards to representation.
Because I suppose...
the only black character that we know of is Clover, who is still my favourite, and who was given the personality of being the rebel and fighting for rights and things like that. Even though in her scenes she didn't necessarily act on that, it was more talking.
Yeah.
Please stop that, Kit Kat.
He's agreeing.
And, the only other one which I mentioned was them just throwing out there Harriet. Oh, no, wait, there was another one. There was also Tom that I think they mentioned, who was gay. So Harriet being a lesbian and Tom being gay, it didn't need to be mentioned.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't important to the story. Obviously, because
they're not really main characters. And you know what you said before about
they're not
Ivy only going back to people when she needs them. I think that relates to her group of friends as well, because we don't even see them through the story apart from, like, 2 incidences. That's it. And it's like with Teddy as well. You only really see him when Ivy wants him. Like, so I mean, in that regard, it might just be dependent on how the story was written, because obviously, you know, when authors do their drafts and then they do their proofs and then they do their first, you know, they go through together and cut things out and whatnot, you know, that aren't relevant to them in the story or to what other people have given them feedback on. So I wonder if in that regard you could maybe say, like, is Ivy a tiny bit selfish?
I suppose you could.
I mean, but obviously... Yeah.
Well, I mean, you say tiny bit. I think she's ambitious and she's driven, and not her sole focus, but her main focus is school and career. That's very clear. Actually, because I did think about this, because the way Ivy's character does feed into the stereotype of not necessarily Asian kids being good at maths, but Asian kids being pressured to do well. But the difference is with Ivy is it's herself doing it. It's not her family that are putting the pressure on her. It's herself that's doing it to herself. So does that still feed into the stereotype, I suppose you have to ask. And if that is the case, then does that mean that Ivy is still good representation?
It was an interesting route to follow, because obviously you've seen it in loads of films, haven't you? Like, you know, the Asian Chinese character always being like the clever one, or being forced to do well at school if it's like a younger film. Like, and, you know, I suppose like maybe it would have been more interesting to see know of Ivy's heritage, but see her be completely different from that, as in like not even really be bothered about school. She's just there because she has to be. But then I don't feel like that would relate to that school though that they're at, if that was the case. Like,
no, it really wouldn't. But I mean, saying that, then you look at Audrey's character, and she doesn't even want to be there, yet she can't get expelled. She can't, you know, her dad won't let her leave. Yeah, I was on about Harriet and Tom. Yeah, they kind of, I mean, there's such a thing as doing representation for representation's sake, but when the representation doesn't do anything, like, you don't have, I mean, I can't talk because I don't lean that way, but I don't feel like a lesbian reading the book would relate to Harriet.
No.
Not necessarily, not in any way, but they wouldn't say that they're their favourite character, or they wouldn't necessarily connect because there's nothing, she's barely there. Yeah. She's just there, and it's mentioned that she's a lesbian, and sometimes she talks about her girlfriend, and that's it. It's not needed, and it's not good, because although we need representation, it's very important. It's important that it is good representation.
It's a tough one,
you know, it has to be good representation.
Because reading through it, I can see what they were trying to do. Like, with some characters, they mention, you know, like what race they are, or, you know, like, it's just something like that. So I can see what they were trying to do, but it kind of seems like it wasn't needed. And I get why I guess they were doing it, because they were trying to set the scene of like the types of people that are at the school. But at the same time, like what you said, when they're not really in the story, what's the point? Because you know, there's like setting the scene, and then there's just giving you information that you don't need. Like, you'd only really need it if it related to something down the line, which after reading half those things that they mentioned don't relate to things at the end of the book. Like,
yes, I had a thought. Oh yeah, they mention as well at the beginning of the book how this school like caters to kids from all around the world.
Oh yeah,
so they do. There's loads of different accents and dialects and stuff that they mention, yet most of the characters, at least from what I know, were British or were English.
Like, they might, you know,
the only ones that weren't that were mentioned was Audrey, obviously, 'cause she's from America, and then one of Ivy's friends, who's only mentioned once, who's from New Zealand. And I was like, that feels a bit like a missed opportunity. Especially if you wanted to be diverse or have representation. Yeah. Why weren't there more, not necessarily accents, but cultures or countries of origin, I suppose. So I found that a bit odd.
Was a tough one.
You know, you can see what they're trying to do, but they haven't. It's like they're just dipping their toes in rather than full on diving in. Again, I'm mentioning beach and water references. It's all relevant.
It all relates.
Right, let's talk about the weird ending.
Oh god. Oh, sorry, just before we do, I was just thinking something. You know what we said before about when Ivy and Audrey go to that groundskeeper's cottage or whatever it is?
Yeah.
He invites them for tea. and then like his son or grandson or whoever he is comes home.
That just made me think of another thing as
and
well.
he like comes home, and obviously he's really weird about like Ivy being there, and he says something to her like, I don't want you seeing my granddad and stuff. So obviously that's already a bit suspicious in itself. But I just had a thought, like, I wonder if his granddad is in the Magpie Society or was in the Magpie Society, like, or because like the granddad guy was pretty chill, wasn't he? Like he talks to Ivy, he knows Ivy, he there's nothing to indicate that he's like suspicious and weird at this stage. But the grandson was very odd. Like, it's very odd.
Yes, he was very odd, and the way he reacted was very odd. I mean, for all we know, he could be in or know of the Magpie Society.
Maybe.
But those questions weren't answered.
Maybe they'll be answered.
Something I wanted to talk about, which is something else I want answers, or for it to go further, that gets mentioned and then isn't tackled again, is that picture that they find of that girl from like the 1800s or whatever, who looks exactly like Lola. Can that be touched on again, please? Because it's very odd for you to mention that detail, and it doesn't have to go somewhere, but it should go somewhere. Because it's very, very rare for someone to look exactly like somebody else.
Because as well, obviously, when they got to that point, I was like, oh, they're finally going to link it back to Lola's death and her like potential involvement with the Magpie Society. But it just didn't really go anywhere, did it?
Yeah, exactly. It just led to another, I thought, oh yes, we're coming back to the case, and then it just led to another point towards the Magpie Society, and I was like, oh, that's a bit disappointing. And also, if that one person wasn't related to Lola's family in any way, why do they look like each other? Because
as well, like that woman on the market was very odd as well.
Yeah, she was odd too.
Because as well, that doesn't go anywhere either, because in that scene she mentions their names, but Ivy and Audrey never tell her their names.
Yes, and then they never come back to that fact.
So like, I mean, like, there's a group of people that are very odd, like obviously, like that got me thinking like, oh, is she in the Magpie Society? Because she knows who they are, but they didn't know who she was really, like and then also their head teacher's a bit sus as well, but again, that's never touched upon.
No. Also, what was all the like renovation work about? Like, surely that would have gone somewhere too, because they made a deal about it. And like, one of the things you do if you make a big deal about something, or you highlight something, it should go somewhere. I mean, I know it's plain, it's a different format, but like, we were constantly told about the thing of, if you show a gun in Act 1, it has to be used by Act 3.
We've always thought that at university, like when you have a prop, for example, it has to be relevant to something you're doing, like, or like something you mention, it has to come back around, because or else what was the point? Like,
that's why if you're watching a movie or you're watching a TV series and there's a really odd close-up on an object, that object is going to be important. So yeah, but I just find they were just let's talk about the ending. Let's talk about the weird ending.
Oh, right.
So just picture this, okay? You've gone through, it's your Halloween party, even though they call it Samhain, I think is actually how you pronounce Samhain.
Yeah, something like that.
I really hope that's the case, otherwise I've just learned from a book that's lied to me again. A book has lied to me. Who knew that a fictional book would lie to me? But anyway, so it's that you've come to a conclusion on what possibly happened to a popular girl at school that everyone who died, and you're like, oh cool, I'm friends with my roommate now, we've had our makeovers, let's go to the party. What do you expect to happen? Some dancing,
a few drinks,
a few
selfies taken.
How How about a large number of people dressed up as magpies coming and dancing and freaking everybody out in the halls whilst the lights go out? Did you think that was going to come in?
You know what? I think for Halloween this year, I'm going to dress up as a magpie.
Oh, yeah? Did you expect that to happen? No. Because it's weird.
You know, I thought it...
And do you know what? They come along, right? These magpies come in and are clearly like, they've practiced this. When they've practiced this and no one's noticed, we don't know. But these montage magpies come in, well rehearsed, manage to cut off Ivy and get her to a part of the wall that has been, a part of the wall where a decoration has been,
put up.
Messed up, what is the
Tampered
word?
with?
Tampered, thank you. That's been tampered with, and a mirror falls down and nearly kills Ivy.
You know.
And then these magpies, they just fuck off up the
Go
stairs.
off.
Excuse my language, but they just leave up the stairs.
And again, nobody knows where they went.
Why?
Where they came from.
No one knows where they go. No one knows who they were as the students, because they like get all the students to go outside. Again, we don't know what happened there because this is the end of the book. But it's just so weird.
You know,
It's so
in a way,
weird.
I thought it would have been iconic in a way if they killed off Ivy. Because obviously, it would have been iconic because, you know, on the podcast they say, and one of you's next. I think it would have been shocking. That would probably have been the shocking point in the book, obviously, because she's main character. But I honestly think it would have been iconic if Ivy got murdered.
I know. Honestly, right? Because no other murder had happened and they were going on about the party. So I was like, something is going to happen at the party. And I thought it was going to be another death. No. Instead, it was magpies. Instead, it was people dressed as magpies. And I'm like...
I wonder if, like, Ivy was meant to die at the party, but then she didn't. But then as well, obviously, as a reader's point of view, you knew she wasn't going to die because she's the main character and there's another book that they're writing. So
the thing is, though, like, was the intent actually for her, like, for anyone to die? Because they talk about how it was Clover that did it, and it's the idea that Clover just was trying to do it to make it look like bad things are happening. Like, I don't think Clover intended to anyone to die.
Because also that, you know, that can't, well, I mean, it could be a thing, but after that bit, you know, like what I said, when they go to Clover's room and they realise she's not in there because they think, oh God, Clover must be in danger because she was recording her final podcast before the party. And basically, guys, earlier on in the book, she's threatened from somebody to, you know, obviously stop recording the podcast because bad things are going to happen to her. And then obviously at the end, well, I mean, we don't know if it's bad, but it's not looking good. Like, you know, because they go to her room and she's not in there. And, you know, there's a phone recording on the floor still. And then they play the audio back and she's like, well, is she screaming or just saying like, oh no, you know, don't.
She says a load of things and then I think it's evident she gets like dragged away or something like that.
So obviously the dragging away must have happened as the magpies were sweeping around the hall.
Yeah, I can have a look.
I think it was that.
I suppose.
But yeah, it's a weird one.
Hang on, how does it end? Oh no, it just says the sound cuts off.
Oh right. But yeah, it's weird.
But
it's weird.
And then you have to ask the question, right? Because these are magpies. Is this supposed to be the Magpie Society? Or is this supposed to be the people that don't like the Magpie Society and trying to make it look like the Magpie Society? And then you've got to ask, well, who's against the Magpie Society? Because we're only just learning about the Magpie Society. There, you know, there's things. There's just things you've got to consider.
God.
But yeah, I was so because this is kind of related to the ending, but I put in my notes and was thinking, right, so in that podcast Clover goes on about how no one in the school is safe and that someone's an ex, and I hope someone hears this before somebody else gets hurt. I'm like, there were 2 students alone for a week at that school. 2 students were alone for a week at that school. And the person who's doing this didn't think they could act. They could have done something.
But then they go on about that obviously the Magpie Society is there to protect you. aren't they? So,
well, someone is there that isn't, someone's there is out to do harm, unless this is just Clover staging something.
Maybe, but I mean, that's
but
a
it's
lot.
still very much
a
like
lot for one girl.
if you go if you go with the whole like, oh, no one in the school is safe. 2 people from the school were alone for a week, and whoever was doing it did nothing. Did they just want to be dramatic and plan it exactly for the party, being like, yeah, that's when I'm going to do my next strike. I can only operate during parties.
Literally.
That's the only time I can do anything.
God, if there's another party at the start of book 2. I swear to God. But also,
their Christmas
one
party.
thing I just thought of, going back to Mr. Willis, basically Lola's lover, which, again, a predictable moment in the story. Like, one thing that really made me question Ivy is, like when they find all this evidence against him and they go to him and say, like, this and this. Obviously, there's also that weird thing between Mr. Willis and Ivy that's kind of there, but not really said, not really explored, just kind of lingers in the air, like something happened between them. So something that really made me question Ivy is when, so they go to Mr. Willis and they like show, is it the letter and the photos and all the diary entries from Lola and whatever else, and then they're so stuff. like at him, like, we're gonna take this to the police, you'll never work in school again, we're gonna do this and that, and then all of a sudden Ivy just goes, no, you're gonna leave, never come back, never teach in a school again, and throws all the evidence in the fire. Like, I'm trying to work out why. Like, is there something she knows about him that she doesn't really want out, or like?
I'm not entirely sure. I don't think that they were, there was anything going on between them. I just think that they got on, and Ivy had a crush on him, obviously. So she built up a romance in her head. But I don't think anything was actually going on. And I think because she didn't make it obvious that she was into him to him.
No.
He thought she was an okay student because all the other girls were like goo goo gaga for him. So, yeah, I don't think that. I feel like why she did that was maybe because she didn't want to ruin his life.
I mean, maybe. Like, I mean, she does say that in like the next chapter.
Even though that like was happening, like that was going on between Lola and Mr. Willis, I think she still liked him. Like, going through it, she's probably still processing that he'd actually done that, and so she probably didn't want to ruin his life, because as soon as they take that to the police, his life would be over, his career would be over.
Yeah, true.
So she probably just wanted to give him a second chance.
It's a weird one. It was a weird scene in the book, to be honest. It was a bit weird. Like,
it was a bit. It probably needed some more explanation and stuff.
Yeah.
But again, it's another weird thing to just bring out towards the end of the book. Especially when he had nothing to do with the death, really.
Well, as far as
he wasn't even in the country.
Oh, no, yeah, we do know, don't we? He wasn't in the country.
He wasn't in the country at the time. He'd gone on holiday with his fiancée. They'd done a weekend trip away or something to Paris.
Oh, yeah.
So they knew that he wasn't there at the time. But, yeah. That's what I have to say. I didn't really think much of Mr. Willis. I think there was more that could have been done, but it was kind of, they kept making it. Oh, that's another thing I actually want to mention, even though we've like talked about the ending. One thing that really bothered me is, especially when it was Audrey that was narrating, always had to mention how hot a guy was. Always. And I'm like, you can't think every single guy you meet is hot. Or why is that the first thing that you think about?
Maybe she just attracts the hot ones. I suppose as well that
maybe,
like,
but it's just
we're
like
past that.
it just got to a point where I was like, please, can you stop thirsting? I know you're like 16, but can you stop thirsting for every male person that you meet, please? Please.
I wonder,
There's other things going on.
I wonder if that's to do with her missing her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend. Who knows?
Maybe, but it just got to me after a while, especially since there was no romantic subplot in this book. There was no, I mean, you can kind of say Teddy and Ivy, but that's just on Teddy's side. That's one-sided, and it doesn't even go anywhere. There isn't a romance subplot in this book.
No, which is interesting actually, because a lot of teen books usually do take that route. That route? What?
Yeah.
That route.
That's because well, when I was studying screen acting, they always say to like have so you have your main plot and then you have a subplot, and romance is the easiest subplot to do, which is why you'll see it in like most things. Why there is tends to be romance, because it is the easiest subplot to do, and I think it's so ingrained now in people that if you don't see a romantic subplot, you either won't like it or you find it odd, something like that. I honestly don't even know what I could say the subplot of that book was.
I do not know.
I mean, if I was to rank it, I would go on with the main plot was the mystery of the Magpie Society, and then the subplot would be the death of Lola. That's how I'd rank it.
I suppose, yeah.
Because there wasn't really anything else.
Yeah, I guess you're right there.
But yeah. Oh.
So yeah, what a whirlwind. Like,
what a whirlwind.
Like I said before, if you like mysteries, like, you know, I don't know if it's be your favourite book ever, but, you know, if you're into mysterious things, then you might find it intriguing.
If you're into reading young adult mystery books, I wouldn't really call this like a thriller or a crime. I'd just probably put it in mystery. So if you like young adult mysteries, you'd probably enjoy reading this. I don't know how to rate people that would like rate it 5-star or anything, but I mean it's a decent read. It's not the worst thing you'll ever read, but it's also not the best thing that you'll ever read.
I'm just hoping in book 2 they, like, you know, like when you read the next installment of a book and you go, oh, that makes sense now as to why it was set up like that. I'm kind of hoping that's what we get, because when you look at the reviews for this story, they're so split. Like on Goodreads, I've seen people give it 1. I've seen people say it's not even really worth a 1. I've seen people give it a 5. Like I read one review that said, literally couldn't put it down, read it all in a day. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Like,
I do think that the demographic probably definitely is teens. Whether it's like young, like pre-teens or like mid-teens or late teens, I'm not sure, but I definitely think it's more teens, and we're just a little bit outside of that bracket. Like we'd probably be obsessed with it if we were like 14, 15, and we would look past the faults.
Probably.
But we're not at that point anymore.
I think as well, like when you get to our age, because me and Heather are 24. Well, actually, I'm 23, but I already feel like I'm 24. So,
okay.
You know, because I've read a lot of books like this. Like, you know, I've read a lot of similar books. I really love murder mysteries, love crime books. Just my favorite bag. But you know, like, I don't know if it's because obviously compared to those ones I've already read, it's just not quite up there, like with some of the other ones I've read. Like, you know, so like it's that weird one, isn't it? Because it's one of those where it's not bad, but it's not good. Like, it's that weird one in the middle. It just comes down to that. It is
one of those. And there are some books that are just like that, I suppose. Yeah, you're more of the... I mean, I like mystery and I like my crime things, but when it comes to books, I mostly read fantasy. Like, I'll read a lot of other books, but fantasy is like my main genre. So yeah. I will probably read. Let us know if you want us to read and discuss the second book when it comes out.
Maybe we should make it a whole series. I will... The second one, everybody, is 2 for Joy. So who knows what the 2 is? Are the 2 Audrey and Ivy. Oh, also, actually, before we wrap this up, another thing to mention is on the front of the book, there are 3 girls stood, when you look close in the back, and there are 3 girls stood in a line.
That is true.
And we do not know who they are. Like, I mean, we're assuming that 2 are Ivy and Audrey, but is the 3rd one, is it Clover? Is it...
it's not going to focus.
Is it Lola? Like, we don't know. Or, just had this thought, or is the person in the middle like an interchangeable character? Like does the person in the middle represent like every other character that they interact with and have around them? Who knows?
I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting. I have a lot of questions that I want answered, so I probably will read the second one just because I want questions answered. And if I'm still left with questions from the first book at the end of the second book, and they're doing a third, I don't have high hopes for the third. At this point, I don't really have high hopes for the second.
Like, it's one of these,
but I'll give it a go.
Books, like, some of you might disagree with this statement, but when 13 Reasons Why came out on Netflix, I have not read the books, but when that came out on Netflix, like, obviously the first series was good because it followed the book, and then when they made a second series, it's like, oh, that's going to be interesting because of the way the first series ends. But then they kind of do this whole thing of like how it's the characters processing Hannah's death and stuff, and how it's affected them, and you know, everything else. But during that series, it was just kind of like, oh, this just kind of feels a bit like, you know, like it's just kind of there. But like, it's I find 13 Reasons Why is one of those series where you like, well, for me personally, I never got invested, but it's one of those ones where I'm like, oh yeah, I'll still watch it because I need to know. But I wouldn't say it's like my favourite series ever, and I feel like it's going to be the same for these books. Like, I feel like I'm going to be like, well, I'm not invested, but I do want to know, so obviously I'm going to have to read. Like, oh.
That's an odd feeling when, like, you want answers for something, but you're not so invested, where if, like, one of the characters dies, you're not going to cry about it.
God, imagine if we get to bloody book 7. Oh, God. What
7
is it?
books?
1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for... Oh, what's 5? Is it 5 for gold?
I have it.
I forget.
I have a screen grab of it, I believe.
Because I think, isn't 7 for a secret never to be told? I think that's 7.
Maybe. I'm looking for it. Oh, there we go. Okay. No.
Oh.
What I have screen grabbed is about crows, and about how they crows used to be a form of divination in the UK and other places as well. Yes, fun fact, everyone. Like, if you saw 1 crow, it would signify good luck or something like that, and then if you saw like 10 crows, I don't know. I have a screen grab for it. I thought it was for the Magpie poem.
Magpie rhyme. Oh no, I'm lying. It's 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told. Oh no, there's more. 8 for a wish, 9 for a kiss, 10 for a bird you must not miss. You know, did anybody else know the extra 3? Because I never have heard of the extra 3. Well, can you imagine if we get to book 10? Oh God.
Oh God.
Jesus.
It might even go further. They just restart.
What? Well, what's...
Just go back to 1 for sorrow.
11.
Oh boy.
The Magpie Society.
Right. Should we find? Right. Should I find out what our book is for next month?
Yes, you should.
And you know, everyone wants to know, because then they can also read along and like be like in the comments. Right. So this is what we're currently using. Yes, it is a Christmas bag. I've got paper inside it.
So what we've done, guys, is all of us gave a list of... Well, we gave a list of 5 books, didn't we? Of books we would be interested to read next. And so Heather's put them all in a bag, jar, box. But obviously it's a bag. And now we're going to pick. So we have no idea whose is going to get thrown in. thrown out.
Who's going to get thrown in, thrown out?
Shaking it all about. That's quite exciting.
Oh,
have you got one?
Okay. I got one.
Oh my god, what moment. Shall I do a drum roll?
Oh, okay.
Ready? Drum roll.
If you want. It's The Midnight Library.
Oh!
I don't know if it won't focus. It's backwards anyway. Yeah. I've taken out The Midnight Library.
Taking it out of the library at midnight. Wow.
It is The Midnight Library.
This was my suggestion, everyone.
April.
This was.
Well, I actually want to read This is one of Katie's suggestions that isn't a crime book.
I know. Only time it's ever going to happen.
It's shocking.
Only time it's going to happen.
Shocking.
I've heard good reviews about The Midnight Library. So
I want to read The Midnight Library too, so I'm quite happy with
get ordering that.
The thing.
I mean, we're going to have to start now. Like, we've already lost a few days.
Yeah, but I mean, we've got until... which everyone can see now. We've got until the 23rd. No, we've got until the 30th, actually. We got 27 days.
Oh, God, yeah, we're good. Like,
we're good.
We're
good.
good. So, yeah.
So, yes.
Let us know if you've read the Magpie Society, or if you want to read it. Sorry if this review is, like, ruined your expectations.
Sorry if you're watching this and you wanted to read the Magpie Society, even though we told you that there were spoilers. It was probably even in the video title.
Disclaimer.
And yet you kept going, you brave traveller.
I know, you brought this on yourself, really. Like,
really, yeah.
We just got to hope that our third member doesn't watch this video. Because, guys, at the moment, so our third member, she doesn't do loads of reading, but she does like reading. Like, she does. She said she finds it helps her anxiety, helps her to chill out. But... at the moment, she's really enjoying the story. And of course, that's great, you know. And I said to Heather at the start, she's probably going to have a very different experience with this book because, you know, me and Heather have read a lot more than she has in the last. She's probably going to have a very different experience with this book because, you know, she probably doesn't have much to compare it to, unlike what we've read in, like, similar circumstances. So at the moment, she's really enjoying the book. Said she really likes the characters,
how long that
didn't she?
lasts.
So, yeah, don't watch this, my love. Don't watch this.
You say to her at the end of the video.
You'll have to put it at the...
She's gone through it all.
To edit it, put it at the start.
Put it at the... Don't give me more work.
Oh, well, I mean...
Why would you? Why would you give me more work?
I'm sorry. Oh...
Yeah, you should be.
But yeah,
right.
What's everybody reading right now? Just out of interest.
Yeah,
obviously everybody
reading?
this month's going to be reading Midnight Library, obviously, but...
Yeah, everyone's going to be reading Midnight Library
What's everybody reading right now? I'm currently reading Asking for a Friend. It's very light-hearted story. It's just basically about three friends trying to sort their life out, basically, whilst going on... like dates with these guys they meet at random places. So yeah, it's been an interesting story. Been a good one. I think I'm about... God, sorry everyone. I think I'm about halfway. So obviously I'll finish this before we do Midnight Library. But yeah, that's a good book if you want like a nice light-hearted read in between stories.
Okay. What I have to offer is very different.
Well...
I talked about what I'm reading at the moment in my Let's Have a Cuppa video that Kate hasn't watched yet, but she will.
I will. I'll do it tonight.
You will.
My iPad was dead yesterday and
I haven't edited it yet. I haven't edited it yet, but I'm currently I'm getting ready for April. I'm reading Shadow and Bone.
God, you've whizzed through
the
that.
Netflix series. I'm like halfway through.
You're like at the same
just
thing.
over halfway.
I am with this book and I've been reading this for longer.
Oh, odd.
God.
I haven't been reading as much as I should, so... I mean, you saying that I've, like, whizzed through it, I could have whizzed through it quicker.
Well, you've whizzed through it quicker than me.
It's a...
Like...
Yeah, it's a good book. I quite like it. There's a... I think the thing... I talked about it in my video anyway, but the thing for me that keeps me going in this one is the characters. because it's one of those like first fantasy books where a lot of time is spent with the character trying to get to grips with her new powers that she didn't know she had.
Oh, right, yeah.
So there's a lot of it's pretty much the characters that are like keeping you there, because otherwise it's a lot of training, a lot of getting used to this new life, and pretty much a fish out of water story, really.
I get you.
The beginning's very dramatic. It's very
What, as dramatic as the Magpie Society?
Oh no, it's bigger than that. It's much bigger than that.
Well, don't spoil it.
I'm not going to spoil it, even though at the end of April you can just go and watch it and ruin your whole reading experience anyway. It's so annoying. Do you know I also need to read Six of Crows for that series?
Oh, what, you've got to read
like
both?
In order for me to...
Oh, God.
I've got to read both, because apparently the Netflix series is based on both Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows.
Well,
and I'm like,
that's just really inconvenient, isn't it? That is.
It really is. I can get through it. I just have to order the book.
Just order the book.
I can do that at the same time. I can do that at the same time as getting the Midnight Library. So,
True. Well,
I think that's a video.
Yeah, that's a wrap, everybody.
I think that's a wrap.
Enjoy the Magpie Society if you're still going to read, or if you've read. Hope you enjoyed it more than we did.
Remember, Katie, she has a blog, katieloudoeslife.com.
Leave it linked.
Link in the description. Go give us some love.
Thank you. I need to do a new post, actually. I've got some backlogged,
yeah, maybe.
But
you got some back.
I've done a few, but they're just not uploaded yet.
Okay.
Follow our.
That's your promo done, right?
Follow our Instas. Always doing stuff on stories.
Follow the
everybody.
Instas. Follow the Instas.
Follow the Instas.
Follow the social medias. You know.
The jazz.
Do all that jazz.
Do all that jazz. I don't just mean that. I mean the full-on routine as well from the musical.
Well, while you're doing all that, you can also subscribe to join the party.
Yes.
You can booty slap the like button with consent. And you can, like we said, you can just leave all your comments in the dungeons below and tell us things. You could completely disagree with us and tell us why you disagree. If the Magpie Society is your favourite book, please tell us why.
Yeah, please.
And we'll be like, okay, cool.
I'd love to know.
I'd like to know. Like, did you see some things that we didn't? Did you remember some details that we didn't?
Have you linked things together that we missed? Like,
you got to tell us in the comments.
Please
do. Yeah. Thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you in the next video. We will see you in the next book club.
I mean, you guys will see me again at some point, apart from the book club. We don't know when, but defo the book club.
We don't know, probably. Yeah, she's definitely in the book club. Yeah. She's booked in now.
I'm booked in.
You're booked into the book club.
For 11:40 at the end of the month.
Yes. Oh, right. Okay. Thank you everyone for watching. Love and light. There's this moment where, like, is the thing gonna pop up? Did I do it correctly?